Welcome to Adobe Photoshop TV from the National Association of Photoshop Professionals. And here's your hosts, the Photoshop guys, Scott Kelby, Dave Cross, and Matt Klaskowski.
All right, everybody, welcome to another duty-free episode of Adobe Photoshop TV, brought to you by the fine folks that bring you Photoshop User Magazine. This week's show is sponsored in part by Digital Lifestyle Outfitters. They make the home dock for your iPod and watching it on TV and all kinds of cool things. Also by CDW, and CDW sells just about anything that you can imagine for your computer. So check them out at cdw.com.
And also iStock Photo, anything and everything you need for royalty-free photography, and you can also upload and sell your own photography. iStockPhoto.com. Also, peachpit.com for anything and everything you need for graphics-related books. Check it out. All Adobe books, anything else, peachpit.com.
Hey, that was good.
That was it.
Good stuff.
All right.
Our sponsors love that.
Excellent.
Hey, good sponsors. Hey. All right, welcome back, everybody. My name is Matt Klaskowski, and with me in the studio once again this week, Mr. Corey Barker.
Hello, hello.
Well, as you've noticed, Scott and Dave are not here once again, but they're off doing very, I guess you can say, interesting things this week. Scott is actually off raising miniature Shetland ponies on a small farm in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Cross?
Dave actually was a very fortunate individual. He won a golden ticket this week, and he's visiting Willy Wonka and his famous chocolate factory.
Well, good for Dave. Hey, you got to get out. You got to get some vacation time. So, just because they're not here does not mean that we will not have good tutorials. We not only have good tutorials from myself and Mr. Barker over here, but we also have a special guest appearance by popular demand from Mr. Felix Nelson, NAP's creative director, and we also have another Photoshop World instructor that will be doing a tutorial for us as well. That said, that Photoshop World instructor, I have to keep it a secret, that is John Paul Caponegro, and I was able to find him out at Photoshop World, and I pulled him into a room and I said, do a tutorial. Gave him my computer, and he did just that. So let's take a look at John Paul's tutorial here.
Hi, I'm here at Photoshop World in Las Vegas with John Paul Caponegro, fine artist, educator, author, and man of many, many, many other hats. So welcome, John.
Good to be here, man. Thank you.
So let's get right to it. To be on Photoshop TV, you got to bring a tip.
Okay.
So you got a tip for us?
Let's do some black and white conversions. There's a lot of different ways to do them. There are a couple of ways that are give you the most control and the best preview. Previewing is really important. Something you'll see in Lightroom.
Cool. Well, hey, let's go take a look.
Let's get to it. You'll get superior control over your tonal structure if you start with a color image. That means black and white photographers will benefit a great deal from learning to color correct an image before they make the conversion. With the color information, you'll have far more control over the tonal structure. Every color file is comprised of 3 grayscale images, red, green, and blue channels, each with a totally different structure. Look at this image in the blue channel. Dark at the top, light at the bottom. The red channel, light at the top, dark at the bottom. The tonal structures are completely reversed, and no amount of dodging and burning will ever achieve one of these tonal structures from the other. So, the key here is to get the tonal structure that you're looking for right from the start. I think since we're making visual decisions, it helps a great deal to get previews of this. Instantly, I'm going to make myself a preview, looking at the color image, because you'll see in a second that is important. And I'm going to duplicate it one more time, again with the idea of getting a preview. Now, there's this little known feature in the Channels palette called Split Channels. This will only work with a flattened file. So, of course, we're working on copies. What it'll do is take this one image comprised of 3 channels and break it into their separate channels, creating the separate documents from those channels. So we now have a blue document instead of a blue channel. I like to arrange them in logical order, RGB, red, green, blue, so that it's easier to refer to it. And it really helps to get these windows into position on the screen so that you can refer to them easily when you return to the master file that's ready for conversion. I'm going to use the channel mixer, a wonderful tool for making quick conversions, and you'll see that we can tweak it very fast. If you're using a channel mixer to make a conversion from color to black and white, simply check monochrome. Now, you can specify any percentage you'd like in here with red, green, and blue, and using the files below as reference, you could dial in a certain percentage that would achieve the tonal structure you're looking for. You can mix any amount of the channels together. Be aware of using a percentage higher than 100%, that is a total percentage of red, green, and blue adding up to 100%, or being less than 100%. If you choose to do that, pay attention very closely to your histogram and make sure that you don't clip shadows or highlights. In general, keep it at 100%. But in this case, I'm just going to use the default red, green, and blue conversion, which is 100% red, knowing that I'm going to change the color. So, quick conversion there. I'm going to turn it off so that you see when I come back to the background layer, I'm making a new adjustment layer for hue saturation, and I'm shifting the hue. And now you can see dynamically that one color changes to another. If the color changes before the conversion, then the tonal structure will change as well. So I'm going to leave that there and turn the black and white conversion layer to the channel mixer, 100% red, alone. Come back to the hue saturation layer that's just below it. The order of the layer stack matters. If that hue saturation layer is on top, you won't see any effect. Now that you know that it's sliding the hue slider before the conversion, you'll see that the tonal structure moves very dramatically as I change one color to another. See in the hue saturation sliders, the top bar is the color that you start with, the bottom bar is the color that you're driving that color to. One color becomes another. And you can see that has a dramatic impact on the tonal structure of the image. I might decide that I'd like to lighten up this foreground area here and still brighten the top there. Now we look at the color preview. I can see that basically I have blue below and orange above. The hue saturation slider allows you to change the colors of specific ranges. In this case, I'll target reds and only change the red. And now you can see the dynamic preview allows me to adjust only one area, the red areas of the image. So you have independent control of the colors. This has applications not just for color photographers, but also those who are interested in making black and white images. You have an extraordinary degree of control there. One of the things that you want to watch for is making very dramatic transformations. You may run into posterization. I'm trying right now. That's the master channel. Look at one color. You won't find a posterization when you're doing the master channel, but if you're working with one color and make very dramatic transformations, you may run into posterization. And here, I'll use the saturation just to intensify this. And you can see that it's starting to break up a little bit. Might zoom in a bit into the file, and you'll see that those tones are breaking. One of the keys there that can help is to slide these sliders into the saturation layer so that it spreads out into the other colors and it starts to avoid the posterization. The areas in between these bars are where it's being affected 100%. It's basically a gradient coming out to 0% correction to the surrounding colors. So that's one way to avoid the posterization, but if you're starting to make dramatic transformations to a single color, always guard against that posterization. There is another way to do these kinds of things by turning channels into layers. I'll cover that in just a second. Or at least I'll show you an action for it that you can download off the W website. As a parting thought, remember this image is still in color. You can turn these adjustment layers off and get back to your color at any time. You can even come in and make another color correction on top of this, add color back in. In this case, I might come to curves, add a little bit of red, and suddenly I start toning or tinting my image. You can mix just about any color that you like. You're not limited to a certain chemical combination in the traditional darkroom. In the digital darkroom, you can mix any color, including cross-toning. Get a little contrast to that. You're adding blue here to the highlights. I tend to like yellow in the highlights, or at least a warmer highlight, and a cooler shadow. So it often happens in nature, it's a little bit more naturalistic. I'm not sure how naturalistic any black and white image truly is. It's a wonderful transformation, and we have extraordinary control. What I've done here with 3 simple adjustment layers, you simply can't do in the analog black and white darkroom. It's the kind of thing that I cover in my book and my workshops and other areas. Let me show you one last alternative that you may want to explore. We're just going to start out from scratch. I've set up an action here, which is going to take these separate documents, the red, green, and blue, black and white documents, and layer them back in. Now channels are becoming layers. I've set this up as an action. It's somewhat complex. Anytime you find that you do things repetitively, it's a good idea to create an action like this. And this is an action that you can download off the Adobe website. A wonderful series of white papers that you mentioned that you can download for free. And it looks like that action isn't working well. So let's cut that piece of the video. I'll pause. I'll give you another outtake. Okay, maybe we'll start recording from here. There's an action that I've created for a related PDF on the Adobe website. It turns these channels into layers and will allow you to get any combination, globally or locally. You can mask each layer so that you can have just a little bit of one channel in one area and not in another. There's an entire PDF and an action related to that on the Adobe website. And you can find out more information on my website as well. It's coming up in a future newsletter. So this is an extremely powerful technique. One last caution that I would offer is that when you're establishing that tonal structure, don't try and build mid-tone contrast. So many people try and get a very luminous, rich contrast too quickly. And in the process of doing that, they'll often clip shadows and blow out highlights. Err on the side of being a little bit conservative here. You might want to back off and process the image just a little flatter so that you do have detail, both in the toe and the shoulder, with the highlights and the shadows. And then later deal with mid-tone contrast with a curve. You can boost the contrast in there, getting back that snap, contrast, luminosity, liveliness that you're looking for without clipping the shadows and the highlights. So don't try and do too much with this one adjustment layer. Be a little bit conservative and then fine-tune it later with curves. This, again, is an extraordinary technique. I think what you'll find is that as you change your habits from shooting in black and white to capturing the color and then converting it later, you'll start seeing the world with a different set of eyes. You'll realize that the tonal structure of an image that has any amount of saturated hue variety is variable. As long as you have two hues like this, you have extraordinary control over the tonal structure of the image. So it won't work with foggy seascapes or forests where it's predominantly neutral, or an image that has a single color, like a red sandstone cliff wall. But as long as you have color variety and just a blue sky that's on the ground, you've got extraordinary control.
Well, hey man, thank you very much. That was a very cool tip. Where can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
Oh, it's my pleasure. I teach this kind of thing in workshops, write in magazines. One of the things that you'll find is download the PDF on Adobe's website. A lot of great white papers there. Jeff Sheely, Michael Reckman, etc. And there's a whole library of PDFs that I've been creating on my website. Okay. Send out a free newsletter, lets people know when new resources become available. So it's part of extending this kind of training to the community.
What's the website?
JohnPaulCapanegro.com.
Hey, great. We'll get our video editor, and she'll put it up on a little thing on the screen. Hopefully it'll be right below us right now.
Fantastic. Maggie will help to spell that last name.
All right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate it.
Hey.
Thanks for coming by, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, John Paul, thanks a lot. Always great to see those guys at Photoshop World and get a lot of insight from them. So
Definitely.
coming up in the show, of course, we've got Felix Nelson coming on, and I will be having my own tutorial here shortly. But right now, we're going to go to Mr. Klaskowski and see what he's got for us.
Yep. Okay, so this week I have a tutorial on Camera Raw. Now, not Camera Raw Advanced, this is Camera Raw 101. Basic Camera Raw. What do you do with this RAW photo when you first open it up inside of Camera Raw? So, let's take a look here. First thing I do is, you launch Camera Raw two ways. You either open up Bridge and just double click on a photo, and it will open up inside of Adobe Camera Raw, which, by the way, if you ever see the acronym ACR, that means Adobe Camera Raw, and all that's talking about is this Camera Raw dialog that you see here. The other way you would launch Camera Raw is by going to the File Open menu inside of Photoshop. Either way, when you have your RAW photo, and you open it up, you're going to see this dialog box. And what we'll do here is we'll work primarily over here on these settings. So the very first thing you'll see that we can do is I can change my white balance. So if I haven't set my camera on the right white balance, or perhaps maybe I went out shooting on a cloudy day and I set my white balance to cloudy, and then I come back home, I go out on a shoot the next day, and I forget to change my white balance. Well, it's okay. You can change it here inside of Camera Raw. It's always better to get these things right in the camera, but you can change it here inside of the dialog just by changing to any one of these white balance settings here. Now, what I usually do is I'll give a quick cycle down through the white balance settings and just see which one might look better for my photo. But for most of the time, what I'll do is I'll keep it on as shot, and we're going to come right back to this in a little while. Now let's jump down to really the settings that I use most inside of Camera Raw, and these are primarily your exposure and your brightness settings. The very first one here is exposure. And exposure works with the light areas of your photo. How bright will your photo be? Now, there's an easy way, before CS2 I should say, you had to use a trick to see whether or not your highlight areas were getting clipped, because that's primarily what we're working with here in exposure, is the highlights. And when I say clipped, I mean they're all white. So if they're all white, that means there's not going to be any detail. And so what you had to do is I used to just drag my slider over to the left, hold down the Alt key on PC or Option on Mac, and start dragging it to the right. And as I get further to the right, you'll start to see some areas appear in that black area. That's letting me know that I am clipping those highlights. And again, when I say clipping, I mean they're becoming all white. So when I let up, you can see the areas over here have now become all white. So that's pretty much what you're doing here, is you're losing the detail inside of these areas. So what I do is when I see that, I start to pull back and just reel that back in. I'm okay with a little bit, but not too much. So that's how I find my exposure. Next, I go down to shadows, and the shadows works the same way. What I will do is I'll hold down the Alt or the Option key, bring it all the way to the left, and then just start dragging to the right. And you start to see these areas appear. Well, that's the shadow clipping. And these areas are now becoming all black, which again is typically bad. It means you're losing detail in those areas. Now, it doesn't always mean it's a bad thing, because I'm okay with a little bit of clipping. I like to see some of those deep blacks inside there. So I'm okay with a little bit. What you probably don't want to see is something like that, because then you're gonna find it's way too dark. So I'll usually go in here and I'll get it just so I can see some of the edges here. Now, after CS2, or CS2 and after I should say, we do have two options up here, shadow and highlight clipping. And if you turn these on, it will start to show you where you're clipping inside your photo. And you can adjust your exposure the same way. You see, it does the same exact thing. The only reason why I'm not crazy about these is because it starts to kind of protrude in onto my photo. So now instead of me getting to look at the photo, I see these red and these blue areas inside here, which I just don't care for the way they look. So I generally keep them off, and I find my exposure and shadows with that Alt or Option key. One more thing about it, if you flip over to Photoshop here and you go into Levels, you'll see that the exposure and the shadow settings are very similar to your black point and your white point in Levels. So I'm trying to just equate this to what you might be used to already working with in Photoshop. You're used to seeing levels, you're used to adjusting that white point or that black point. Well, those exposure and shadow settings are very similar to those. Now we jump down to brightness, and brightness is primarily going to control the quarter and the three-quarter tones inside your photo. And when I say this, what I mean is it's not going to make all those areas totally white and totally black. If I move this over to the left, it makes the photo darker, but not as dark as if I adjust those shadows. And the same thing holds true for the right. Brightness is primarily just consisting of those mid-tone areas, the quarter and those three-quarter tone areas, which is just going to make your photo lighter or darker and not necessarily make anything black or white. So I usually I tend to leave on the auto setting, and I'll just adjust the brightness a little bit if I don't care for that setting. And then contrast, the best way to think of contrast is just move it all the way to the left. And what it's going to do is it's going to make your photo very gray. So what I'll do here is I'll start moving it to the right, and you'll start to see this gets a little bit too punchy if it's all the way to the right. So somewhere, again, in the middle to the 3/4 area usually works pretty good for contrast, and all it's doing is just deepening the dark colors and it's brightening the white colors. And again, it's not pushing anything to black or white, it's generally just adding some more contrast, which the setting says right there. But what you'll find here is too low of a contrast and the photo looks very muddy. And now we go down to saturation, and saturation is exactly what it says. It will saturate your photo with more of the colors that are already inside of it. So you can see here, you can always go too far. If you move it to the left, it makes it a black and white. But again, I'll usually generally just saturate a little bit, maybe plus 15 or 16 here. Now, I talked in the beginning about white balance, and I'm going to come right back around to that. At this point, what I usually do is here I'll start cycling through my white balance because I've pretty much processed the photo. I'm happy with the exposure in the photo, and now I'll just take a look at the white balance settings here and just see which ones I like the most. Daylight, and I think cloudy is probably the one that I settled on here because I really like what it did to the colors in the background here. So I'm going to settle on cloudy, and then at this point what you can do is either click done, and that'll take you right back into Bridge and save your raw settings. So it's getting saved and it's not overwriting anything, it's just saving these raw settings, or you can click on open and that'll open up the photo inside of Photoshop so you can edit it. So that is your Camera Raw, your bare essentials to using Camera Raw, what those basic settings in that very first tab do. And later on down the line, we'll take a look at some of the other tabs inside of Camera Raw. But again, just for people just starting out, maybe you just got a DSLR and you want to experiment with RAW mode, go ahead and try it and see the things that you can do inside of ACR.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Excellent. All right.
Well, folks, it is time for a commercial. So we will be back in 30 seconds.
HomeDoc Deluxe, the essential entertainment center for the iPod. Enjoy all of your music, pictures, and video right on your TV and home stereo system. HomeDoc Deluxe is the only iPod dock with on-TV navigation of your iPod's music. Nothing is better than browsing your tunes on your TV with remote in hand. The 18-button remote and on-TV navigation of your music makes the HomeDoc Deluxe the only choice for your living room. DLO HomeDoc Deluxe, where your iPod lives at home.
Well, we are back, kooky guys. But we are back for better or for worse. We're still here. And you'll see something has changed. And no, it's not that Corey put Scott's head up over his computer. You'll see that we have the fine Mr. Felix Nelson here with us as well. So
How you guys doing?
good. How are you,
All
man?
right.
Good. Say hi to Corey.
Good to have you. Felix, welcome.
Well, by popular demand, Felix is back for a tutorial. But you know what? You guys got to let me do something because I finished my tutorial and I forgot to show them one little thing here. So I'm going to jump in.
This is my airtime, you're cutting in my
I know,
space.
I'm sorry. It's only going to take 30 seconds. The one thing I forgot to show them is, so you finish you finish processing your photo, but how do you know if it's better than what you started with? You go up to the preview button and you turn the preview off, and that's what you started with, and then you turn it back on. So it's very important there because you want to know where you were and now where you are now. So sorry about eating into your airtime, Felix, but
That's okay, that's all right.
I had to show that.
You
Where
know,
are
if you
we
have
now?
a camera, I don't own a camera, so I have to draw stuff. So or you're just too stupid to use a camera, like myself. I'll draw stuff. So
Good segue.
good segue. As it so happens.
God, I wish I had a picture of an
What do you need?
iPod.
Good, because that's exactly what I can do. An iPod like that, and not just any old iPod. The new iPod Shuffle. That's what we're going to show you how to draw that in just 1 second.
That's pretty fast.
It's an action.
Okay.
No, all right.
Go, really.
Let me get started. First of all, we're going to do, I'm going to show how to do the paths. People got freaked out by paths a lot of times. So I'm going to go in here and you're going to go to your object. Oh, hold on a second. We've got to start some things here. All right.
There you go.
There we go. Now we're ready. See? That's what it means to be a professional. All right, here we go. All right, we're going to get the in
Your time's up, you know.
Oh, thank you. Then my second's up.
1 second.
All right, we're going to get the rounded rectangle tool. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that the radius isn't quite so big here. So we want to go, it's actually pretty small right there. We'll make it like 0.07 or 0.75 or something.
Because
you want the
exactly.
corner that's the exact, absolute exact number you have to use. You can't use any other number. Now you can use as many different numbers as you need. And we're going to start just creating a rectangular shape right in the center of our document here. And that's going to be the base of our iPod Shuffle. That's just like that. All right, now, but we're not quite done yet. We're going to get the circle tool from there, or the ellipse tool, and you're going to draw. And I'm going to hold on the Shift key, and it actually constrains the circle, so it makes a perfectly round circle. So I'm going to just click that on there. I'm using the space bar just kind of to put it in the right spot. You don't have to be too exact. You just want it over on the left side or the right side of the rectangle. So something about like that will work. Now we want to take that same circle and you want to duplicate it, make it in the center. Instead of trying to figure out where the center is and all that kind of good stuff, what you do is you select that with the Path Selection tool, press Command-Option-T or Control-Alt-T with a PC. And all right, what that does is actually duplicated that selection. So what we're going to do next is just going to go up to the Options bar and type in 60% because you want to make that circle right in the center. And you can see it just puts it right in the center. It makes it, perfectly round circle right in the center of your other circle. So press Return and then Return again to apply the transformation. So we've got all the paths that we're going to need, so we're done making paths. So we're going to create a new layer, and we'll select the first path that we made, and you can click on it, and you go over to the Paths tool, and you can just hit on the Load Paths tools of selection. Let's change the foreground color to just a light gray, somewhere about like that. I'm going to change it so it has a little bit more of a bluish tint to it. About like that's pretty good. All right, we'll go back to our Layers palette. We've got our new layer that we created, and we're just going to Option click to fill that with that layer. Now we want to make the sides look rounded, like it's, the edges are curved or have some contour. So I'm just going to take the Dodge and Burn tools, and you want to make sure that the range is on midtones. You change the exposure to like maybe 30. And let's get a fairly decent size brush, maybe like a 40 pixel brush. And we're just going to burn right on the edges of the selection. You might take a couple of times to do it, just to kind of darken them in. Oops, let's undo that. We don't want that little thing going across there.
That looked nice, though.
Yeah, it makes for a nice effect, but it's not what we wanted. All right, so we've got the base of our nano, or I'm sorry, of our shuffle. Now, next thing we want to do is add some highlights to it. So we'll create another layer, or we'll hide everything in Photoshop, whichever works for you. Let's go ahead and create another layer. Press D and then X to bring the foreground color to white. Let's get the gradient tool, and you want to make sure that you click on gradient to transparent, or foreground to transparent. That's that second little icon there in the gradient editor. Now, as the gradient type, we want to get reflected gradient, and that's this like fourth icon right at the top of your options bar there. Now, on the left side, you want to make a highlight here. You may also want to make a highlight on the right side. I'm going to show my path so I can see where the track wheel is going to be. And I'm going to start by clicking right in the center between the outside of the selection and the edge of that path. So I'm just going to click on the center and drag it out towards the edge of the path. That'll give me a nice little highlight there. The same thing on the other side. Just go over, click just off inside, and just maybe towards the right a little bit. Now they look a little bright, so you want to get rid of that. So we'll go to the Layers palette and just lower the opacity to like maybe 60 or 50%. Let's try 60. That works pretty well. Now I want to define the edge of the background, so it still looks like it's just kind of floating there. So I'm going to go back to Layer 1, and let's go ahead and choose Stroke from the Layer Style options. Now we don't want a bright red stroke there. We just want to drop that down.
Red, Felix.
Yeah, if it was Christmas time, it might work, but we're going to make that like a darker gray. Just about like that.
Outrageous red like that.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got requests into Adobe.
Exactly. So we're going to drop the size to 1, and if it still looks a little harsh, because sometimes if you leave the opacity up too hard, it'll look a little cartoony. So I'm just going to take the opacity and drop it down a bit, and just kind of keep watching. All you want to do is define the edge a little bit. So let's hit OK, and now we want to start working on the dial itself. So we're going to go back to our Paths palette, grab the outermost path, and you have to switch to the Path Selection tool, and let's go ahead and grab that. and make an active selection just by clicking the load path of selection. Now you want to get the inside. You want to knock a donut hole out of this path. So select just the center path, and then option click on the load paths icon. And when the selection dialog comes up, go ahead and leave it, subtract from selection, hit OK, and you've knocked out a hole to the center of the first selection. So we'll go back to our second layer, layer 2. We're going to change the foreground color to a little white, but we want a little bit of a blue tint to it again. And just about like that will work. And all you're going to do at this point is now fill that layer, option delete, fill it with like a light blue. And if it gets a little too dark like in that, you can always just bring up your levels dialog box and just drop the output level a little bit just to brighten it up a bit. That looks about right. All right, we'll deselect. Now once again, we want to define this edge a little bit because it doesn't look like it's really part of that. So we're going to go in here and go to, once again, we'll choose stroke. Oh, look at that. That's crazy. All right. Obviously what we've done is put that layer on the wrong thing, so we'll go ahead and do a couple undos. Let's put that on its own layer. Let's try that. There we go. And let's deselect that.
So you just want to have that shape on its own layer.
You want it on its own layer because obviously you don't want to pick up any of the attributes from the layer that's going to be underneath it. So we'll fill that, deselect once again. We're going to try and define that edge. So we'll go to stroke, and this or pattern overlay.
I like the bubbles.
Yeah, the bubbles are always great.
All those default settings.
All right, so we're back to this ugly red. This time let's drop that. Let's choose a black color, hit OK. And we want to drop the size again to 1 because we just don't want that fat stroke on there. And once again, if you look at it, it looks a little cartoony because it's got that hard black edge on it. So I just lower the opacity a bit until it looks like you're defining the edge, but it doesn't look fake. So that's pretty good there. Now the next thing you want to do is give it a little bit. You want it to look like it's sunk into the base of the iPod Shuffle. So we're going to click Bevel and Emboss, and we're going to choose Outer Bevel. And you see it looks like it's actually poking up. All we're going to do is click the down button to make it look like it's actually sunken down into this base. Now, it's really too harsh of an edge there. So once again, we'll drop this down to like maybe 3 for size. And I want the shadow direction or the highlight to come from the left. So I'm just going to uncheck the Use Global Light box and move that over towards the right. And that's probably Apple calling right now. You know, Apple legal saying I shouldn't be drawing this. No, actually, all right. We'll go ahead. Now, that looks pretty good other than I got this really harsh black edge. And I don't want that shadow on there. So I'm just going to take the shadow mode and just drop it down to 0. And all I want is just the hint of an edge there. So we'll hit OK. And basically, last thing you do, we're going to add some play buttons. And center those in our icon or in our path thing. And that's it. That's a
sweet
iPod Shuffle in just a few minutes.
Cool. That was, as a matter of fact, that was Apple, and they were telling us that you are infringing upon many things.
Of course.
Hey, very, very cool. Thank you very much for coming
You're welcome.
by. See, that is why everybody requests you to come back.
That's right. You don't need cameras. You just draw the stuff.
Excellent. But that is Mr. Felix Nelson, Creative Director for the NAPP. So we appreciate it, Felix.
You're welcome.
And
thank you.
So that said, I think it's time to go to the news. So let's head over to the News Storm Team Center.
Hi guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the news with me, Stephanie Cross. First off, version 3 Depth of Field Generator Pro has just been released. You can check that out at dofpro.com. Want to win an iPod and lots of books? Check out the Peach Pit Name the Bunny contest at peachpit.com and name that cute little bunny. I'm Stephanie Cross. This was me with the news for you guys, and I will see you next week.
Well, let's check out where all of our Photoshop and graphic design related friends are. First off, we've got our buddy Terry White. Terry is going to be in San Francisco with a Kick Butt InDesign tour, and he'll be there on November 10th. So check out Terry in San Francisco. Also, our buddy Bert Monroy, creative genius extraordinaire and all kinds of those fun things. Bert is taking his creativity tour. First, he will be in Fort Lauderdale on November 29th, and then he goes over to Jacksonville on December 6th. So you can find out about those tours, and you can find out about all the other Photoshop tours as well at www.photoshopseminars.com. That's it for Photoshop on the Road. We will see you again next time. Welcome back once again. My name is Matt Kloskowski, and with me is Mr. Corey Barker. Still. Corey,
Yes.
I think it's time for a tutorial from yourself.
Here we go. So I have my image of a glass here, and we're going to make a drink right here from scratch. So what I need to do first is create a new layer, and I'm going to go over here and get my lasso tool, and I'm just going to draw just a random odd-looking shape here, and we're going to fill this with...
That looks like an ice cube, Corey.
Not yet,
Oh,
but it will.
it does.
I'm going to fill that with a 50% gray here. And then next, I want to make sure I've got black and white as my foreground and background colors. And I'm going to go to Render Clouds. And then I'm going to go ahead and deselect that. We're going to, again, go under Filter, and this time we're going to go to Artistic Plastic Wrap. And no, we're not making a plastic wrap.
You're not making, but it's called plastic
But
wrap.
it's called plastic wrap. So always experiment with these filters because you never know what they're going to do. Just because it says it does one thing, don't always believe it. That's what you have to do. Like you don't have to use the crosshatch filter when you need a crosshatch effect. So I'm just going to play with these settings in here. You can, depending on the type of object you have, you can just pretty much see what you get, depending on the type of, I mean, obviously when I set the clouds in here, it was very random, so how you set your filter here is going to be varying also. So there we have that. Now, with that, I'm going to go and change this layer's blending mode to overlay. And then we're going to actually make a duplicate of that layer. Now, could probably make a third duplicate. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold down my Shift key, and we're going to select all three of those layers. And now we're going to go to, can't see it here, I'm going to go to New Group from Layers. And we'll just call it Cubes. They look something like cubes.
It's a cubey.
So, first of all, this looks a little too big, so I'm going to go ahead and do my Command-T, bring up my free transform, and just scale that down just a little bit. And I'm just going to kind of put that in position right down here. And that group I've got, I'm just going to duplicate that entire group. And that'll give me another ice cube. So I'm just going to bring up my free transform once again and position this over here to the side. And we'll duplicate that again. And I'm just going to fill this glass up with a whole bunch of ice cubes. And if I wanted to, I can actually control click and flip this horizontally or do whatever I need to do, just to make it a little different. If I really wanted to get into it, you could go and use the warp tool, but then you would have to do it to each individual layer, but because you can't apply a warp to a group. So
Corey loves that warp tool.
I do love the warp tool. And I'm going to actually use the warp tool here in just a minute.
I knew it. I knew he couldn't do it without a warp.
So make another ice cube, just put that right over here. So there we have a glass full of ice, but it's, it's no good without any drink in it, unless you just like to chew on your ice.
So you can add some Pepsi?
Maybe some Pepsi, maybe a little whiskey, I don't know. Depends on who you are. So on a new layer, I'm going to get my elliptical marquee tool, and I'm just going to draw kind of a shape just a little bit bigger than the ice itself there. And again, I'm going to fill that with a neutral 50% gray. And I'm just going to deselect that. And I'm going to go under, and we're going to do another clouds filter. I'm going to go to Render Clouds. Oop, actually, I want to keep it inside that gray area, so I'm just going to click on my Lock Transparency. And again, we'll go to Render Clouds. Now, like before, what we did with the ice cubes, again, I'm going to go back to the plastic wrap once again. But we're not going to apply the effect as harshly as we had done on the ice itself. So I'm just going to bring it back just a little bit. This is going to make up the kind of liquidy texture of our drink, of the liquid in the drink. So back that off a little bit. Now, to colorize it, I'm going to go ahead and bring up my hue saturation. So I'm going to hit my Command U and bring that up. I'm going to hit colorize here. And there you can see we're kind of getting some color there. I'm just going to bring this up until I get kind of a soda, a brownish
Slash
soda
whiskey.
slash whiskey, or a rum and coke. However you like it.
For those of you that don't know, we're drinking whiskey right now.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the only way we could be this bad.
In fact, pour me another shot while I'm waiting here, while I'm finishing up here. So, there's our beverage. Now, I need to make this fit within my drink. Now, the first thing I'm going to do so I can see what I'm doing, and to complete the effect really, is to change the blending mode of this. We'll try, nope, not multiply. We'll do overlay. Not overlay. Hard light. That's
there you go.
Hard light. So, here is where the warp tool comes in. Dun, dun. So, with that layer active, I'm going to bring up my free transform, Command T, or Control T. And I'm going to right click or control click on there, on the object there, and we're going to go to warp. And I'm just going to move these handles so that that element
tasty
gets right inside the glass there. I'm going to bring that level down just a little bit. And we'll just maneuver these. I'm not holding down any keys as I'm moving. I'm just clicking and holding down and moving these pointers to wherever.
And you could always drop the opacity too.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to leave that top a little wavy because the next thing I'm going to do to complete the effect, as you'll see in a minute. So,
very cool.
I've got that distorted in there. So there we have a little bit of our drink. But that top edge there is not quite finished yet. So here's what I'm going to do to finish that off. I'm going to make a new layer. And I'm going to go over and get my path tool now. Now, first thing I want to do, I'm going to actually apply a brush stroke to a path that I'm going to draw. But I want to make sure the brush stroke I'm going to apply is the one I'm going to actually want it to use. So I'm going to get my brush stroke here, or my brush tool here, and I'm going to size down, I'm going to bracket down, make my brush size a little bit smaller, and make sure I have black as my foreground here. I'm going to go down really tiny. And I'm going to do my shift key and bracket up, so that makes the brush a little bit more harder edge. And I want to go over here to my brush's palette, actually. I'm going to turn off smoothing, but I want to turn on the shape dynamics because I want it to be pressure sensitive to the way it's going to apply on the path there. So there, as you can see, that's the brush stroke I want. Now I'm going to go over here and get my path tool. I'm going to click on that end, and I'm not really adhering to the specific edge of this drink, just kind of following the guide of it right along there. So there's my path. If I go to my paths palette here, there it is right there. And all I'm going to do in here is go making sure we're on that new layer and go to stroke path with our brush tool that we just made, and we're going to simulate pressure, keep that checked, and just hit OK.
Finishing touch.
And all I got to do to finish that off, really, is just change its blending mode. Oh, try it. Oh, no, it was overlay.
There you go.
And we can just kind of scale that. It kind of gives us our top edge of our drink.
You
And there you
warp?
have. What?
You gonna warp it?
Do I need?
You're the warp guy. I figured you had to.
You know, I really could. Probably could warp it to make it just for my own satisfaction. But for now, there it is.
Very cool.
A fresh cocktail for anyone who's thirsty.
Cool.
All right.
Very nice.
All right.
So I've been thinking of the worst possible joke with that tutorial, and I said no, I can't say it but I figured this show is about bad jokes. So is that glass half empty or half full?
Well, you know.
No, there's
you don't really have to,
you don't have to answer it. But well, that is it for Corey's tutorial. Nice tutorial, by the way. Let's take a look at our contest from last week. First up, the question was, what does the setting tile boundary come from? And for those of you that watch every week, you know that I love to shout out the Pattern Maker filter for every answer. So the answer this week was indeed the Pattern Maker filter. So congratulations to name that appears right now. Now, it would not be completed unless we had a contest for this week. So, Corey, do we have a question for this week? I think you got it. We do have. Okay, it's a hard one.
I have one. It's a good one. Now, I challenge everyone watching to really dig deep and find this dialogue box right here. If you can find it, you be the first one in, you will get, what will they get?
They will get, let's show them the prizes here. They will get a copy of Illustrator Techniques newsletter. They will also get a copy of Layers magazine.
And last but not least, you will receive the critically acclaimed first season of Photoshop TV. Check it out. Find that dialogue box right now.
Cool.
All right.
All right. Well, let's end the show as quickly as possible. Got 3 things to do. My things to do are Enrique over at PhotoshopRoadmap.com has created this like monster tutorial on Photoshop, everything behind a Photoshop plugin. So if you're ever interested to learn how they work and how you can start creating your own Photoshop plugins, go check it out over at PhotoshopRoadmap.com. Also, you can visit PhotoshopTV.com to get all of the links that we are talking about here.
And also, go check out Aaron's new comic strip series, What the Duck. It's a lot like Dilbert for graphic designers.
It's funny,
it is
too.
hilarious. Check it out, What the Duck.
And finally, go check out the BT Journal. This is by nationally renowned wildlife photographer Moose Peterson. And Moose has got this journal that comes out, I want to say it's every quarter. So if I'm wrong, go to the website and tell me I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure it's every quarter. He's got this journal. So if you're a nature or wildlife photographer, you've got to go check it out at moosepeterson.com. Folks, it is sad to say,
That time again.
but the time is here. So we are done with yet another episode of Adobe Photoshop TV. I thank you guys for sticking around with us, and I thank Corey for coming here.
Thank you.
And I thank me for nothing. But anyway, that's it for this week's episode of Adobe Photoshop TV. We will see you again next week.